This is Five Places Los Angeles, a podcast by the LA Forum for Architecture and Urban Design. I'm Emmanuelle Bourlier, and today I'm excited to share our very first +1 interview. In each episode, I've been asking our interviewees to name someone whom they would choose to ask about the 5 places that define Los Angeles for them. As each interviewee invites a +1, our living documentary of the city grows and evolves. Carolina Miranda, the arts and urban design columnist for the Los Angeles Times, whom I interviewed in episode 1, chose Carribean Fragoza as her +1, and in a few moments you will hear their wonderful conversation. Carribean Fragoza is a fiction writer and journalist from South El Monte, California. Her collection of stories, Eat the Mouth That Feeds You, was published in 2021 by City Lights and was a finalist for a 2022 PAN Award. Her co-edited compilation of essays, East of East, The Making of Greater El Monte, was published by Rutgers University Press, and her forthcoming collection of essays, Riding Home, New Terrains of California, will be published by Angel City Press in 2023. Her work has been featured in numerous publications, and she is the founder and co-director of South El Monte Arts Posse, an interdisciplinary arts collective. For Carribean's full bio and links to all the places and people she references, please check out the show notes. For Carolina Miranda's full bio and interview, please check out episode 1. Here is Carolina interviewing Carribean.
So I am Carolina Miranda. I am a writer at the Los Angeles Times, and I'm here to talk about 5 places with Carribean Fragoza, author, journalist, novelist, short story writer working on her first novel, author of one of my favorite pandemic reads, Eat the Mouth That Feeds You. If you've not read this book, read this book. And she has a bare bookshelf behind her, so I'll advertise her book for her here. And contributor to this incredible collection, East of East, The Making of Greater El Monte, which I believe you helped edit.
Yes.
So welcome, Carribean. Thank you for playing with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Carolina. I'm happy to be here and share and play.
Talk about LA.
Yep.
So I wanted to start with, so before we get into your 5 places, tell me a little bit about like where you are from and where you are now, because LA is a big place. So let's get that nailed down.
Okay. So I'm from South El Monte / El Monte, California, which is in the San Gabriel Valley. That's where I'm from. And I'm currently not there. I live in Claremont, which is on the eastern edge of LA County, bordering on San Bernardino. So this is where I happen to live right now. But I'm from El Monte. I go there all the time, and that's home for me.
Awesome. And I know that in your writing, I think, this 5 places LA, when people talk about Los Angeles, they frequently think of city of Los Angeles. And in your work, you focus on that concept of the greater Los Angeles. What do you think gets lost when we only think of LA as city of LA?
Well, I mean, the city of LA has very defined parameters, and city of LA, as we all know, is huge, but greater Los Angeles is even more huge than that. And it includes all these other important regions of the LA area. And I think that it's sort of a disservice to only focus on what is the proper city of Los Angeles, because we're mobile people. We move across vast expanses of space. And I mean, we drive everywhere. And those of us who grew up in LA or in the greater LA area are totally familiar with driving all across the county for a backyard party, or to catch a show, or to visit your relatives that live like many miles away. So we're always like moving across the whole greater LA area, and beyond, actually. I mean, I'm interested in the other areas as well, because we're all connected to each other. It's not like other cities, perhaps, that are really self-contained. We just sort of spill over everywhere. And I think it's necessary to include the greater LA area and beyond when we think and talk about what Los Angeles is and how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is all one contiguous megalopolis. Like you drive from one community into the other, and there is no break.
Right.
One more question before we get into our 5 places, which is tell me a little bit about your short story collection, which I believe was your first, and also what you're working on now. This is the short story collection.
Yeah, that is my first book of fiction. It was published by City Lights last year. So we were in pandemic. I mean, we are still in pandemic, but last year, 2021 in the spring is when my book came out. And I think it's worth noting that a lot of the stories, not all of them, but many of them are based in a sort of fictionalized version of El Monte and or inspired by it in some way. So people that know El Monte or South El Monte recognize it in the stories. And but a lot of other folks that are not from the area at all have really been able to connect with it. But there's always a really strong sense of place in each of the stories. I have another, maybe 2 stories that were sort of inspired by the Central Valley, because I was living in Fresno for a couple of years with my family, with my husband and kids. And so I find ways to very naturally and organically to include setting and place as an important part of the stories. And then all of the stories are really based on and rooted in the voices of young women and girls and señoras as well. So women of all ages.
I am definitely entering my señora age, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do. Speaking of El Monte, this book has, this collection has a terrific essay you wrote called Rush Street that takes place in El Monte and is really about literally having a place under your skin. It involves a bicycle accident. And it really is just this beautifully poetic description of place. I had underlined this phrase here that I'm going to embarrass you by reading it, that I think is just terrific. You describe it as, you've had your accident, you've scraped up your leg, and you write, I wish it had been dirt, which is earth or soil, but true dirt is hard to come by in places like Rush Street. Instead, there are grease, dust, metallic flakes, rust, and jagged pebbles, never worn smooth by water or wind, but broken down like many little teeth knocked out of the busy mouth that is the street. So anyway, this is a terrific sense of place in this. So I feel like this is a great opportunity to talk about your 5 places. LA, what places for you are the most LA places? And we can use that in that greater LA way. So let's start with number 1.
Yeah, number 1 is actually connected to that essay.
Cool.
Rush Street is a main avenue that you can take to the location that I'm about to talk about. And it's the Starlight Swap Meet, which is located on Rosemead Boulevard. So Rosemead Boulevard is a very long street. Well, it'll take you all the way to Long Beach. If you take it long enough, it becomes Lakewood. But Starlight Swap Meet is a historic swap meet that was shut down not long ago during the pandemic. And it was a place that I grew up going to since I have memory. So my parents used to take me not to the mall as a kid, but to swap meets on Saturdays and Sundays. And the Starlight Swap Meet is the one that was closest to my house. It was the Starlight Swap Meet, or if we were adventurous, we'd go to Santa Fe Springs and go to the swap meet over there, which has its
one
own
by the 5. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love swap meets. I love being in the outdoor spaces. It was just such, I don't know, just like such a plethora, such an explosion of sensory experiences every time that I went. There was food everywhere, of course. There was toys, just all the plastic, little bright colored Chinese like toys, just tinkering everywhere. And I wanted all of them. There was pets. You could buy a pet there. You could buy furniture. You could get a haircut. And then my favorite aspect of the swap meet was the music section, where you could buy tapes and then later CDs and records and stuff like that. And I loved it because there was always cumbia blasting, and I just had this thing as a kid where I just had to dance. I mean, still as an adult, it's like cumbia, like you just go on cumbia
It's
mode.
on.
It's on. Like,
once
I don't
cumbia
care.
comes on, it's on. Exactly.
So that was like the place for me. Like, the cumbias at the booths. And then also I have memories of the oldies like booths, and they were more of like a Mexican American generational, I don't know, like for people that have been here longer and they're more connected to that sort of history of like what we consider the oldies. So anyway, I really loved going to swap meets as a kid. And it was something that I thought was great to have during the pandemic because of access to outdoor space was something that became really valuable during the pandemic. And swap meets was one of them, though some of them were shut down. And this one in particular that is so near and dear to my heart was shut down during the pandemic and closed forever. And now it will become a housing development that will almost certainly be too unaffordable for me or anybody that I know to live in. So I know that a lot of folks that I know that are friends of mine that grew up in SoCal also went to swap meets. There are indoor swap meets, but I grew up on outdoor swap meets, and I still love them. I try to go every chance I get.
I'm really intrigued about the way I don't know the Starlight one, but I do know the Santa Fe Springs one, and I am intrigued very much by how swap meets take some existing piece of urban space and completely repurpose it, because Santa Fe Springs is in an old drive-in. I don't know what kind of area. Same with Starlight, and how this piece of land that had one life can then completely take on another with like the arrival of the swap meet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that about people of color and Mexicans in particular, because that's who I am. I'm Mexican. But like just that ability to transform this sort of unused, ignored space into something vibrant. And, otherwise this drive-in would have just sat there empty during the day and nobody would have used it. And then it turns into this whole like fiesta, basically, whenever there's a swap meet.
Exactly. It's like, we will turn your shopping into a party.
Yeah.
Are your parents immigrants from Mexico, or are they from here?
No, they're both immigrants from Mexico.
Okay. What region are they from? Just out of curiosity.
So they're both from Jalisco, Guadalajara. My dad was born in Zacatecas, but raised in Guadalajara, and that's where they both met. And then they married there and then migrated over here to the United States. But my dad's father, my grandfather, was a bracero. So we had that connection to the United States through the bracero program. And that's how my dad was able to cross the border legally and work here for many years before he married my mom. So we had that sort of entry into the United States. But I was born here. I was born at the county hospital in LA. I love it when somebody asks me, so where are you from? Like, I'm from here. No, but where are you really from? And then I love pointing at the hospital if I'm close by, you can see it. I'm literally from right there. I was born right there. And then that shuts them up.
I was born in Wyoming, and so that always like screws with people too.
They're like,
my dad was on a job there when I came along, so they're just always like, no, but where are you from? I'm like, Wyoming. Me and Dick Cheney. All right. On to LA place number 2. What is your, or greater LA place number 2?
So nearby, near the Starlight, is Leg Lake, which is part of the Whittier Narrows Parks. So Whittier Narrows Parks is maybe about 4 parks that are sort of joined together. And you can find the parks on both sides of the 60 freeway. Sort of if you move east of the 710 towards the 605 along the 60 freeway, you will sort of run into this whole green space that seems to just sneak out of nowhere. And it's the Whittier Narrows Parks. And that's the Rio Hondo River, which is a tributary of the San Gabriel River. And so that's why we have a waterway, and we have a lot of green space, and then these whole huge parks there. And Leg Lake is the one that has a lake in it, and it's pretty big. And I grew up going there, and I love this park, not just because of my own personal connection, but because every time you go, you'll see all kinds of people. People go to fish there, and I love to check out the fishermen, the fisher people that are at the lake fishing. God knows what. I've never actually seen a fish come out of that lake, or if you should even eat it, but people
some kind of monster fish. That could be like a story. Right?
That would be really cool. I do.
What kinds of creatures do you fish out of Leg Lake?
Yeah. So there, but the point is to just sit there or stand there with your pole or whatever your instruments of fishing are and like smoke a lot of pot. Apparently there's a lot of pot, and then there's some metalheads. I love to like be around there when the metalheads are just kind of chilling, listening to like metal, like really loudly and smoking weed. They're like the chillest metalheads that are fishing ever. And then you just see like senoras, like working class, like people going to get their workout after work and or relaxed. It's totally packed on the weekends, barbecues everywhere, frisbees flying all over the place, trying to decapitate you. It's just like a very vibrant space all the time. And it really brings together all sectors of LA. People come from the city of LA, not because they don't have parks over there, but because this is such a great, big, vibrant stretch of land that you can relax in and have a good time. And I know that there's generations of families that go there and hang out. So it becomes sort of like a family space over the course of multiple generations to come and relax at. And there's car shows. I mean, there's just so many uses for that space. And Leg Lake is just such a beautiful connection to nature that I think a lot of us, again, during pandemic have really craved to connect back with nature, connect back with the outdoors and with green spaces. And I think luckily, Leg Lake and Whittier Narrows is available as one of the largest green spaces in LA County. And it's just such a blessing to have that.
And it's these interesting, I have been in that Whittier Narrows area, and also like places like Griffith Park and in the Angeles National Forest. It's these reminders of this really insane topography that Los Angeles has, that like no matter how much you build on it, like the topography at the end of the day still rules.
Right.
Like, the mountains still overwhelm it and the scale of it still overwhelm it. And I feel like sites like that are a little bit of where you can kind of scratch at
totally
that,
Yeah. And Whittier Narrows is such a great example of that, because just a little bit of history, because that's one of the things that I do. The Rio Hondo has been there since all of time. But when the Spanish missionaries tried to build the original San Gabriel mission along its banks, they were not aware that there's this thing called flooding that occurs in our strange, peculiar rivers down here. And so they were flooded out eventually, and they had to relocate the mission to where it is now. But back to your point about how the topography eventually does what it wants and is what it is, no matter what you try to build on it, it's just going to be, and you got to deal with it.
Yeah. And the sites are a reminder of that. All right. Number 3.
Number 3, the callejones. So this is in the city of LA.
Yeah. Like Santee Alley. And
yes. So I also grew up going there. A lot of people that I know used to go there and still go there. But the callejones I love escándalo and just like ruckus and like noise. And I love these like oversensory experiences. And I find Santee Alley and the callejones to just be exciting spaces that can overwhelm your senses in really great ways. And every time I go, there's just everybody's there, like tourists to like just señoras really trying to get their cobijas for the winter with their animal print on it. And it's just people getting dresses. And so it really brings together a whole set of different people. And if I may, I have like one special little story to share about that.
Yes, please.
My story particularly, but I feel like it's mine. And it's a story
we're here for chisme stories that we've heard secondhand.
Yeah. So I have a friend, he's from El Monte. He's a lingerie designer named Miguel Barragan. And he grew up going to the callejones, and he loved looking at the lingerie, just calzones and bras and all that stuff hanging. And he always had this sort of interest in lingerie and eventually became a designer of lingerie. But for him, one of the key moments in his career as a designer was going to the callejones and finding knockoffs of his own work, of his own calzone design. And he was so like immensely flattered that people would like do knockoffs of his calzones.
Oh my God.
Coupled with meeting Bob Mackey, who I have heard went to school in one of the El Monte high schools. And so Bob Mackie, being such like an epic, iconic designer, meeting
did the famous Cher Academy Award dress, like
I guess. I don't know. I'd love to see knockoffs of that in the callejones. That would be fun to see.
Oh my God, that would be good. I love, I once covered a performance that Rafa Esparza and a bunch of artists did in the callejones. They dressed up in these like absolutely like crazy outfits, and they did performances. They engaged people on the street who were out shopping. I mean, it was like you said, it's this really kind of insane sensory overload, kind of carnivalesque atmosphere. And then Rafa and this group, and Rafa was wearing this collar made from a bunch of barking puppies that he bought at a toy stall. Those puppies that, you buy them and they go boop, 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 and they have light and then they flip. And he had made a necklace out of them, and he had all these puppies, and then there was all these people in costume and two devils. And I mean, the whole thing was just like bananas. It was amazing. And it was interesting to learn that, a lot of those callejones are private property. So when Rafa and team showed up, there had to be like some dialogues with the owners of the spaces about what they were doing. But it is this place, like I remember him telling me about like, when they would go out clubbing, like the callejones would be like where you go out and get your looks, or if you're working on a performance and you need some like crazy outfit, like you can go to the callejones and find it. So it's like really this place that has just like, it feeds so much.
Yeah, totally. So,
all right. I think we're on number 4 now.
Number 4. Yes. So back to El Monte, and it is a special place that I always want to return to, and it's the car wash tacos. And what that is basically a taquero who set up in a car wash. And it was one of my most brilliant and delicious taco experiences probably ever. Tacos de birria. So it's like birria. This was, I would say, like at the very beginning of like the birria craze. Now there's like birria at Taco Bell. Like it's everywhere. Yeah. There's birria and barbacoa. But at the time, not many places were serving it. And he set up his taco stall in a car wash. And there was a table that we were invited to sit at. And it was just like one of those fold-up tables that you can move around. But I don't know why they did this. They put it right over this little ditch where the runoff water from the car wash would flow into the street. So you're sitting having your tacos as this like trickle of car wash water is just running under your table.
It's like you're bridging the waters.
Yeah. And, it was just part of the experience. And the tacos were super good. And then as I'm enjoying these tacos, I notice I actually feel like the gaze penetrating my soul of a señora who's like sort of perched on the side with this other grandma. And they're looking at me. And then when they see that I'm looking back, they say, ¿Qué le parece la salsa? I was like, ¿Qué la salsa? Sí, está buena. ¿Qué le parece? And I was like, the salsa is delicious. I love it. ¿No está muy picosa? Pues sí está picosa. Sí, está muy rica. Qué bueno. Yo la hice. Like, oh. So it was the mother of the taquero who was very excited to have people try her salsas. And so anyway, I got to give my immediate review to this lady of her salsa. So anyway, that was just like a fun experience. And back to talking about and thinking about how people and raza and like migrant communities repurpose space. Like, why can't you have a delicious like taco experience in an active car wash? Like, why not?
So, do you know what's the name of the car wash? Or is it just
it's in El Monte. I can't remember exactly the name of the car wash, but I have seen other car washes that also serve food. And I think that's really interesting. There was another car wash in El Monte that was serving vegan Mexican food. And it was sort of like an experimental thing because once they had enough customers, they moved into an actual brick and mortar of their own. So it was kind of like a trial space at the car wash where they could sell their vegan Mexican food. So
there's one here in El Sereno that is a pupusa car wash, and it's a small hand car wash place. And so while you're getting your car washed, you're getting and they make the pupusas to order like it's real deal. And so we treat it as, okay, car wash brunch, like
why not
go have like our pupusas, get an agua, like hang out while the car is in line to get washed. But yeah, I think those should exist all over Los Angeles as far as I'm concerned. All right, number 5.
All right, and number 5 is also back in LA. I know of this place by the name of the Warehouse District. Some people nowadays, I hear, are calling it the Artist District. But quien sabe, no sé. The Warehouse
District. I may have heard of this place. Yeah, I know.
Maybe. I don't know. It's a fad. It'll just kind of wear itself out, I think. But in my mind, because I'm stuck, it's in the 80s or something. It's still a warehouse district because my dad is a truck driver, and he spent many years, decades actually, driving to this area of LA, to this particular area that is now the Arts District. And he would pick up many tons and tons and tons of meats, and he would like ship them. He would put them in his truck and drive them off. So he has this like sort of special bond to the area. And one of his favorite things to do now that he's retired and no longer a truck driver is he loves to go to the Arts District and talk smack to people that are spending $8 on their coffees and saying, did you know that this was a warehouse district and there used to be meat hanging from a hook right there, but in Spanish, of course. Well, in English, actually, in his English that he can speak. And there used to be meat hanging there, and then some hookers that I remember. They were so nice. They used to hang out under that bridge over there, and he just kind of creeps people out talking about his like old man trucker days. And I love that. I love that about my dad, who's a troll sometimes, and I love that he reminds people that
what was there.
This was a really important place to the development of the city of Los Angeles. And for me, I mean, that the age of industry was so key to the development of Los Angeles, and it connects Southeast LA. It connects us to the Port of Los Angeles. It's just like this important heart of the city that gets forgotten often.
It's the industrial heart. I mean, it's one of the things I constantly tell especially outsiders who assume LA is nothing but like woo-woo Hollywood starlet types, is this reminder that we have the biggest shipping container port in the Western Hemisphere here, that at the heart of the city is goods, migration, shipping, transport. Like basically if you live in the United States and you've got some imported Chinese good, it almost like 99.999% came through LA. And that infrastructure it's like right here. You can see it. You drive freeways like the 710 and the 605, and you're gonna see that heart of it. The warehouse district for me, I also think of like the early 90s when like I was a young idiot. You'd go to like some weird bar or artist event in some like empty warehouse and probably drink too much cheap beer, but it would cost like $3, And now it's like, oh, I think I was in this warehouse once, but now the cocktails are $20.
Oh, yeah.
a lot of change. Well, I feel like I need to revisit or visit for the first time some of these places because I have not been to the Starlight. I was always closer to the Santa Fe swap meet. But I wanted to ask you how you think maybe some of these places in particular. I mean, you talked a little bit about the Starlight may have been affected by the last few years of the pandemic. Is there anything that you've noticed about how these places have evolved over the last couple of years, or are some of these still going strong?
Well, let me think about it. I think a lot of these spaces that I mentioned, like Leg Lake in particular, again, sort of underscores the need for green space. I don't know that it's evolved. It's still vibrant. I did see more people getting out there and trying to be more active out in the open, clean, uncontaminated air, but it's right by the 60 freeway, so it's not that clean.
Yeah.
So again, it just sort of, I think this pandemic allowed us to think more about the importance of green space. And then, of course, like our evolving understanding of climate crisis and how serious it is. It's again, making us reconsider how we can value and protect and nourish these green spaces, and not just in parks, but like in other green spaces throughout communities. So yeah, I think there was a newfound appreciation for spaces like Leg Lake and Whittier Narrows and just green spaces in general. So that's maybe something that might have been punched up a little bit during pandemic.
No, and I think something you were talking about, like the swap meet, the whole outdoor, you have these like tianguis that also like pop up in like little corners of LA. Like we do have this climate where you can have these experiences outdoors, and it's safe and actually more interesting and kind of fun than being in some air-conditioned box.
Yeah, totally. And then also during pandemic, I mean, again, connected to Starlight Swap Meet and what it's on its way to becoming, which is a unaffordable housing development. I mean, the housing market has not chilled out at all during pandemic. It's
gotten worse,
which is horrific and just immoral in every way. And so that's something I think about a lot. I always think about housing and lack of affordable housing for communities and how that's become exacerbated during this pandemic. And I think as I'm getting out again, as many of us are getting out into public spaces, I'm sort of relearning how, or I'm learning what the world looks like nowadays. Again, things that I thought were there are no longer there or became something else during the pandemic. And one of the things that I noticed again during the Whittier Narrows section is just like this huge increase in homelessness and homeless encampments. There was a fire that broke out in the last week in one of these encampments along the river. And even when I came back from living in Fresno just 2 years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, I just noticed this huge increase in homelessness that was like visually witnessed like everywhere. So that's something that has also become more prevalent, I think, during pandemic.
Yeah, because previously people were being shifted about, and what the pandemic did is it allowed actually people to stay in one place so we could see them. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what it's been about. Yeah. Who is the person that you'd like to hear from about the 5 places that define LA for them?
Vicky Vertiz, poet, writer from Southeast LA. She's from Bell Gardens, and I think she would have some really great locations to share with us.
Ooh, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll get Emmanuel on that. That sounds really awesome. Caribbean, thank you so much. That was great. And let's go hit the callejones one day, or maybe a car wash.
Yes.
My car's always pretty disgusting. So
mine too. So we have a lot of excuses to go
we can catch up. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Carolina. This was fun. Thank you.
To learn more about Caribbean's work and the books and places mentioned in this conversation, please check out the show notes. To hear Carolina Miranda's 5 Places, visit us online at fiveplaces.la or look for episode 1 wherever you get your podcasts. To hear more stories of the places that define Los Angeles, please subscribe. And if you're enjoying the show, we would so appreciate if you could rate and review the show or share it with friends. 5 Places is produced by Annalie Garakani, Quinn Wynn, and me, Emmanuel Bourlier, for the LA Forum for Architecture and Urban Design. We recorded on Chumash, Keech, Tongva, and Micanacan land. Thank you for listening.